Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's stream. It is a Zamo the Destroyer stream, so we are going to be working on some Zamo stuff. Let's switch over to the dual camera. Oh, by the way, hi, my name's Piero Draculea. I always kind of forget to introduce myself, but here we go. And a cough right off the bat. Anyways, here's my usual streaming schedule in case anyone's wondering. So this is the last night we are working on drawings of Zamo's secret basement lab. And I think what we're going to do, well, I know what we're going to do because I did some blue line underdrawings, is that we will be, let's see here. So this is the entry to the lab. Why don't we start showing the map? So this is the ground floor of Georgie's house. Georgie is Zamo's pet human. It's a split level, so you come in on ground level. The rec room is a painting studio. There's a laundry room, mechanical room, yada, 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 foyer, up a few stairs, and then this would be living room, kitchen, dining room, but underneath that is a big crawl space. This is based on a house some of my relatives had. So we have previously drawn the little corner that Zamo has left for Georgie to store Christmas crap and canning and whatnot. And then we've got these curtains going through. And Zamo has made it very clear that it's iguanas only beyond the curtains, right? So then we drew, this one always kind of makes me chuckle, Zamo trying to brainwash squirrels. You know, Zamo wants to take over the world, needs an army to do that. I'm not sure that brain-damaged squirrels are the best option, but, you know, you got to work with what you got. So there's a little acorn on a pendulum doing the, "You're getting very sleepy. You wish to take over the neighborhood on my behalf." We've also had Zamo's secret hydroponic treat growing farm. So strawberries and it's probably mustard greens or whatnot. And then we did Chimp Watch, which is almost a little surveillance area with, you know, old TVs that were thrown out and left on the curbside. And Zamo has connected them to various cameras, spying on Georgie's boyfriend, on Georgie, on the neighbors, on Zamo's bullfrog minion Hoppy. The corner, the intersection at the corner, so Zamo can tell when Georgie's coming home. Monitoring gardens to know when things are ripe and ready to eat, and then, you know, a couple other stations. And then we had just a little hint of the chem lab area, as well as the International Bank of Zamo, which refers to an older joke in one of the old comics for Zamo, wherein Zamo can't get a bank account, so Iggy keeps her money in a hole in the basement wall. Iggy saves, Iggy saves, Iggy saves. And hidden behind a curtain, of course. So I figured for these last couple, I mean, in case things go really quick, I do have a blank piece of paper I can draw on, but I think these are probably going to be about 45 minutes each drawing. So I'm going to shuffle my camera over that way. First, we're going to start with Zamo's desk. Now, Zamo's claim, Zamo, by the way, in case you're new here, that's Zamo. I'll figure out how to point it. My sense of direction is fantastic, as you can tell. Anyways, that's Zamo down in the corner. Zamo is an iguana, and Zamo claims to be a postdoctoral, you know, a professor from the Iguanid University of the Jungle working on postdoc anthropological research. That's Zamo's story, and Zamo's sticking to it. We rarely see Zamo doing actual anthropology fieldwork, but whatever. So let's assume that we've got this little desk, which is drawn somewhere in the map. There is the little Zamo secret desk area here. And then we're going to have a bigger view of Zamo's chemistry area. But for now, let's start with the desk. And I may go to a full screen on the document camera, but right now this is fine. So one of the things Zamo wants to do is drive the human neighbors insane and study them. The excuse about studying, probably mostly BS, but it's Zamo's claim that that is the motivation, purely for scientific reasons and not for, entertainment. Oh well. Anyways, so, and there was actually ages ago. So Zamo the Destroyer was a webcomic I did back in the MySpace days. And then it kind of went on hiatus for a while, and then I did a podcast based on Zamo the Destroyer. And then afterwards, the podcast was on and off for several years. And then it's been on hiatus, but I figured because this is the 20th anniversary of when I started working. Let me adjust this there. That's better. Now we can see what I've been writing. Hit the autofocus again just to make sure. But because this year is the 20th anniversary of when I launched Zamo the Destroyer, I figured this would be as good a year as any to get off my ass and do a book with all the original comics. I've got 200 and some odd podcast episodes. We'll deal with those later because, that is a lot of content. So several books. But first we'll do the comic omnibus. And these secret basement lab drawings, I was kind of thinking, oh, this is going to be like an appendix to like a bonus content kind of thing. The one issue that I realized when I was going through the comics is there's like 3 or 4 that mention the secret basement lab, but we never get a glimpse into it. But when I was doing Zamo as a podcast, then it was very commonly referred to, that Zamo's hiding out in the secret basement lab and doing all sorts of stuff down there. So I will probably take these drawings of glimpses into the secret basement lab and use them for the first book of podcast scripts as bonus content there, because it kind of make more sense at that point. But which in that case, what it means is I'm basically done the Zamo omnibus, other than in terms of like content creation. I do have to spend probably 2 or 3 days just scanning everything, and there'll be Photoshop adjustments I have to make because, you're working with pen and ink, and Zamo was definitely an analog cartoon back in the day. You make mistakes that then get photoshopped, and I did Photoshop them back in the day. The problem is that, in the MySpace era, a giant image for the internet would be like 600 pixels tall, but print resolution is 300 pixels per inch. So yeah, I suck at math, but even I know that is basically a postage stamp. So I have to rescan all the original art and do it at high res so that I can then, actually use that. And that means that any corrections I made in Photoshop were done on the teeny tiny scan. I think I was scanning at like 72 DPI or whatever, which is, standard screen resolution. But anyways, so there's a whole lot of scanning I got to do, and then I got to redo any of the corrections when I realized I spelled something wrong or whatever. So be working on that in July. Actually, I might actually spend my Friday, possibly part of my Saturday this week, just scanning comics. We'll see. I got to get it done pretty quick, but I've also got a few other things on the priority. I'm kind of thinking, well, speaking of fixing something, I realized I'm thinking of this as a billboard or bulletin board, but if it's got writing on it, then it should be a whiteboard. But you know what? There are some, I'm just going to, I'm just going to make a tiny arrow in the side, which tells me, I mean, it would be kind of obvious that I need to make some fixes, but I'm going to do one of those combos where this side is, I'll put some like magnets or whatever. This side is a whiteboard and this side is a bulletin board. And I'll also give it a little bit of visual distinction, right? So, what else did I say? Oh, well, you know, with Zamo being an iguana or whatnot, some exciting lizard-related news. So where I live, I'm in Canada on Vancouver Island, but there actually are some lizards that are, there's like, I think one, maybe two species of lizards that are native here, and then there's a different species that's, I think, the European wall lizard that is introduced, invasive, whatever you want to call it. And they look very, very similar, unless you get up close, super close, to see the coloring is slightly different or whatever. But down in Victoria, if you go to, well, maybe not Bouchard on a hot sunny day because I think they hide, but there are these little lizards that tend to live in rock walls and like cracked concrete and stuff down in Victoria. So, for example, Highland Pacific Golf Course, there's like a rock wall around the practice greens, and I have seen these little lizards there. Bouchard Gardens, where they have rock walls along pathways. If you're there and it's a warm day, but it's, you know, quiet for whatever reason, because they will hide when the tourists are around, because, you know, they don't know that we're not predators. Well, we are predators, but not necessarily these little lizards. But there's these tiny little lizards like this long. And anyways, there's one that lives around my dad's house, and he lives about 20 minutes away from me. He's a little more rural. I have never seen one of these little lizards in my garden until this afternoon. I happen to be looking at just the right moment. I see this little tiny lizard run across my concrete patio. I was like, oh, wow, I've got one. One of them has decided to grace my my garden. So that's pretty cool. I'm kind of excited about that. So the iguana would basically say, hey, buddy, you're on my turf. That's my human. But anyways, so that was kind of fun to see today. It's been really hot in the 30s here. Although today I think it topped out at like 27 or something. It's going to be in the high 20s, like 29 tomorrow, and then it's going to, I think, revert to the high 30s. So anyways, we may see our little lizard friend again in the yard, but we don't know about that. So decided that Zamo has on the desk an old ass typewriter. You know, not the most technologically up to date, but there's just something about Zamo using this, which is kind of just like a stick with like some wadded up whatever fabric or something on the end, and using that almost like a plunger going like this to hit the keys to type on, to type out that postdoc thesis. And what would the postdoc thesis be about? Well, let's be blunt. Zamo tends to have a very dim view of human intelligence, so it's probably about something about how we worship the dryer god by carrying lint amulets in our pockets so that the dryer god won't get angry and steal our, you know, steal our socks. Just have to adjust how I'm sitting so that, oh, look, I already have a big mess of ink on my hand. Usually I don't get it on the back of my hand, but hey, it is what it is. Anyways, now I gotta make sure. I'm just gonna put my Kleenex on top of my hand so I don't like transfer the ink onto my shirt. But anyways, I just envisioned Zamo somehow is collecting these items, maybe from garage sales or who knows what, but used random gunk and putting it to work. So this is based on, I think, a photo I saw of a 1920s typewriter. And I have no idea. I have like vintage, like 1960s portable typewriter that I got at an antique mall. Because I just kind of, well, basically because I wanted one for, to get some authentic typewriter kind of looks on certain things. Actually, it had to do with Ricky B. the Rock and Roll Rat graphic novel, not the current graphic novel, but a later one I'm thinking of, where I wanted some notes that would be like typewritten because, you know, Baby thinks that, you know, Ricky's girlfriend Baby thinks that old-timey things are all romantic and all this sort of crap. Anyways, I picked one up so I could use it for that. Have not gotten around to actually using it for that purpose yet, but anyways. Point is, I have no idea what it is. I have a vague idea of what I'm drawing because I saw the photo, but I don't actually know what the hell I'm doing. So it's going to be kind of an interesting thing. This is definitely like the black roller thing. I think that's good enough that won't mess up my shirt. Anyways, so should I quickly pull up a reference image? Yes, I probably should. I should have saved that. Fortunately, I just looked it up an hour or so ago. 1920s typewriter. And of course, I'm not going to find the same one that I looked at earlier, but yeah, I found one that's similar enough that I can flip back and forth between. And there we go. So, bother writing in the name of the company here, but they all kind of had their letters in here, and there was like a, I don't even know what the hell I'm drawing. This particular one looks different than the one that I saw earlier, but there was like some sort of a carriage type of thing. Hey, if this one doesn't match an actual working antique typewriter, well, more of the reason why it was thrown out, right? Funny, when you look at a reference photo for something like this, it's like, I know what it's going to look like. I got the idea down, and then it's like, what the hell is this that I've drawn? Anyways, I do know that these are all like the letter keys come in here, and they would strike through that portion. But that's what makes it weird, because the letter would come up here. I guess it would clear whatever this bar is. And that's the idea. Sort of gizmos are a little bit along the same lines of what I was talking about the other week on the Friday stream, where I was drawing the hot rod and going, yeah, see, the problem is the cartoonist has no idea how car engines work, let alone hot rod engines. So things are going to look a little bit weird. Also, this one does not have the correct number of keys by any means. It's going to flop to document camera only for a little bit, because when I'm bent down with my head kind of drawing, you're basically just seeing the top of my head, and my hair is a mess. So I was out in the garden all day today, so okay, that's what's causing the shadow. So even though I washed my hair this morning, it got, sweaty and messed up within like an hour of me getting out of the shower. So but a lot of progress was made on the yard, so that's a positive at least. The reference image I used from a 1920s typewriter, it almost looked like you had to have your fingers quite spread to type. It's not like even the 60s typewriters, they were pretty close, right? But back in the day, I guess they were more concerned about keeping the keys from like smacking each other or whatever. So Now, I don't remember. I don't think it was really a thing with the webcomics for Zamo. It might have been kind of mentioned in passing when I was doing the podcast version, but it was at some point it was supposed to be the case that Zamo was the editor-in-chief of Iguana Digest magazine, and had all these duties as editor, and was, basically learned that volunteer gigs suck in terms of, their time sucks, Um, but I'm trying to remember if it was ever really a thing in, when I was doing Zamo as an actual web comic. I think that was more part of the story that I came up with later on. But because I do remember doing one or two like digital comics where it was like almost sitting at a desk with an old-timey kind of visor on, like newspaper editors might have worn at some point back in the day. And there was like a side view of this kind of typewriter. And the idea was that Zamo was writing this month's editorial for Iguana Digest magazine. So the typewriter's roughly done. Obviously, it's not perfect. And this is, the typewriters from the 1920s were super open. So crap could fall through them and whatnot. And maybe that was the point, was that dust or whatnot would fall through it rather than, the later portable typewriters where they would just kind of gum up in between the keys. So let's, anyways, let's do the edge of the desk. And just kind of put some sense of wood grain. Doesn't have to be too realistic. These are going to be shrunk quite a bit too. So that. And what's being piled up here, in theory anyways, are Zamo's postdoctoral papers, writing about our species and all that, so that the other iguana scholars could learn about humans. Not that they would really care to, if they're anything like Zamo, but anyways, I just want to have like a random mess of notes and whatnot all on the desk. And I pinky swear that's not just to justify the fact that my desk is an absolute, looks like a tornado went through it. Let's assume someone's reading Freud. And because Zamo is an iguana and likes oranges, let's draw a nice mandarin. Little snack for later. If Zamo's writing notes, Zamo also needs a pen cup. Fortunately, I have several on my desk that I can kind of glance over at. And now let's just add in more of that wood grain. I will come in with a thicker nib to put some heavier shadows in place as well. I'll probably also grab the crow quill and try and put in some really fine lines, although, yeah, actually maybe not, because of the fact that I intend to reduce this image. Sometimes the crow quill is so fine that it's going to just vanish. So it's kind of a waste of time in that sense. Put that over there. Kind of have their shadow already. And we'd probably actually end up cropping out the edge of the desk, so it would end up about like there. So I'm kind of thinking we might just leave it at that. So now we're going to go on to the next drawing. And we may be done very early today, if it goes that quickly. So not sure I can think of any other things I want to add into the secret basement lab today, but anyway. Switch back to the dual view for a moment. While I figure out this, I think it's easier to just slide the document camera and do it that way, I think is the best approach. So, one of the things with Zamo is that Zamo is kind of a little bit obsessed with money and gold. You know, Zamo as an iguana insisted that iguanas were descended from Tyrannosaurus rex, despite all scientific evidence to the contrary. But, you know, that was science done by people. There we go. And also kind of, Zamo was into the whole, like, dragon motif, right? Well, dragons hoard gold, right? Where are you going to find gold if you're an iguana and you don't have your own bank account? Well, you can try and steal it. You can hope to find it. Or you can pull out an alchemy textbook and see what happens when you melt down lesser kinds of metals. But, well, we'll get right back to the bigger camera view. You're going to see very quickly that so far this has perhaps not been going that well. Well, it would kind of appear that Zamo's been having a dry spell. Also, yes, I did kind of look at it and go, well, it's been 20 years since I started the comic. Has Zamo ever managed to make gold? Well, apparently not yet, because that is the amount of days in 20 years. But, you know, soon. After all, the odds have got to switch pretty soon, right? At least Zamo is going to be attempting that. Of course, one could be a little more optimistic and say, is the sign accurate, or is that what the sign that Zamo put up so that Zamo's pet human, Georgie, wouldn't know that what Zamo's up to? You know, I guess it depends. Are you an optimist or not, right? The sign could be lying, but it could also be that Zamo has not succeeded in making gold yet. Decided that would be fun to have Zamo have like an old-timey kind of apothecary scale. But it would seem that there's not much that Zamo needs to actually be weighing, but you know, it is what it is. Some fishing weights that Zamo could be trying to melt down. You know, they often said that they would try and make gold out of lead. Didn't really work, but you know, lead would be an easily obtained thing that Zamo could try to melt down. So we'll draw a couple of these. These are fairly big fishing weights, so I think I might draw some littler ones as well. You know, those kind of ones that look like small flat discs. Really small ones. Got some nasty fumes coming off of that, because why not? Looks like the Bunsen burner is a little bit overzealous, perhaps. Kind of a high-risk operation here. I mean, needless to say, don't try this at home. And not just because it doesn't work, but because it probably involves a lot of nasty fumes. Definitely don't have open flame this close to your propane tank, especially indoors. I mean, I guess on a barbecue it's that close, but nonetheless. Zamo is not too concerned with safety, as we can kind of tell from how things are done in Zamo's lab. One imagines that most of the books Zamo got about alchemy turned out to very disappointingly be about, self-improvement and spirituality. Because a lot of it is that sort of stuff. Oh no, the gold that you find is your own spirit. That's not the gold Zamo's interested in. Zamo is very interested in actual gold. But I did, when I was Googling and flipping through Amazon for what sort of books Zamo might find that talked about the actual alchemy experiments, there was one on the history of alchemy. Cover looked, well, vaguely sort of like that. But that was supposed to talk about the actual experiments that were done, which Zamo could use as like a to-do, but and a how-to, yeah, that's what I meant to say, a how-to kind of a manual. Washing out my nib again. Okay, well, just dropped a little glob of ink there, but that's okay. You just use paper towel to kind of suck that out. Now this, of course, is not on the floor because, the tank would be going down lower than that. But can always be that something spilled. I will use a fatter nib to put in shadow underneath the work desk, but I want to draw this stuff in first. Okay. Now this may not show up very well when it's reduced in size, but I'm envisioning this as a stainless steel workbench. So I'm thinking kind of like, I mean, in a biology lab, I don't think they would have brushed steel, but chemistry lab, they might. We will come in with a fatter nib to put in some heavy shadow as well, but that's going to be a little in a moment or two, or 5. I imagine Zamo would quite enjoy that YouTube channel Nile Red and Nile Blue, since that dude does a lot of chemistry experiments and whatnot. Put my ink over on this side so I've got room to put my hand down to try and keep the paper from escaping when I'm doing these lines. This crow quill nib does tend to want to scrape quite a lot. So next week's Wednesday stream, we will be working on a new Zamo project, which is illustrating an old Zamo project. In 2015, when I was still a DJ at CITR Radio in Vancouver, every year CITR has this thing called, or they used to anyways, I completely out of the loop, I have no idea if they still do it, but 24 hours of radio art on January 17th. So in 2015, which was like the first year or a few months after I started the Zamo podcast, I offered to do an hour-long Zamo podcast for my slot on 24 hours of radio art. So what I did was this script called The World According to Zamo. So it was like Zamo teaches the youngins at the University of BC in Vancouver, all the things that their human teachers didn't educate them about, which is to say Zamo spreads iguanocentric propaganda. But, it's to balance things out. So it's kind of like a farcical history lesson from Zamo's perspective. And I'm going to do some illustrations for it and put it together into like a PDF, and that'll become like a freebie for signing up for my newsletter. I still have to set up my newsletter. Like so bad, but anyways, that's what we will be working on next week is some drawings from that, and those will also be in the same black and white pen and ink style. So I've already started doing some of the thumbnails, so we have kind of everything from illustrations of human teenagers smoking weed in the baseball dugout at their high school to IKEA building a store on Pluto. It's a bit all over the place. It's kind of wild and crazy, but it should be a fun project for... I think there's going to be like 30 some illustrations in total, so I don't know how long each one's going to take. I don't know if they'll each be like... probably each be drawn about this size, I would think. So, 45 minutes to an hour per drawing, which means it would probably take, about 3 months worth of streams to get through them all. Maybe slightly less. There's a couple that I might just do on my own off camera if, depending. But that will be what we are up to starting next week. So, yeah. Now here's the fatter nib. Had an idea about a motivational poster that Zamo could have on the wall, so let's add that while it's in my head. definitely in the era of the podcast, Zamo was a kind of obsessed with the idea of a dragon horde. So this is kind of like a old Dungeons and Dragons kind of a poster that Zamo has found somewhere. Some of the old rule books used to have these sorts of things that you could fold out and stick up. And Zamo has found one and has put it as a motivational kind of a poster next to the alchemy station. You know, gotta try and keep your chin up when you've got that kind of a record, eh? Now back to adding shadows and shading and whatnot. We'll use the brush to kind of fill in the blacks, but for these little areas that have corners and whatnot, I'm going to use the nib to try and get out of that so I don't mess anything up. think that drawing's gonna be done. I'm just thinking, what else might we do today? I think for main areas, we're kind of done with the lab, but I did have one zone that was kind of like Zamo's secret library or research library. So I'm not going to draw a ton of different books, but it would be fun to kind of maybe do a few that Zamo might have. Now, I'm going to bring this kind of down because initially we will be doing non-photo blue pencil underdrawing, and those can be, they don't show up very well. Almost spilled the ink there, but so I'm going to try and zoom in while I am drawing. I'm envisioning that we're just going to see like a stack of books. So first we'll kind of these are not going to necessarily be real books, although sometimes it's fun when they are, but and clearly we're going to have a very unstable sort of a pile of books. We may actually do a couple piles, but we'll do this one first, maybe. If I'm going to have a couple of piles of books, let's do at least one up here, just because if I do this one and then I decide I want to do a second one, I'm going to smear this ink, right? So I guess if we're seeing them dead on, we're not actually going to see that. So now I'm going to put this back up on. I've got basically just a box of pencil crayons I'm using as a riser for my camera here. Fine. Sometimes this one particular nib just decides to do that and drop a random little glob of ink, but well, that we will definitely need to Photoshop to clean up that line. Sometimes I can get it to pull off cleanly and it doesn't spread out, but anyways. Now let press. Because I can't spell Nietzsche, I'm going to have to, in my other window, quickly go over to Amazon. And while we're there, we may pick out some other book titles that someone might find useful. I guess while I'm doing that, I will switch to the dual camera view. This makes it slightly more interesting, I guess. Beyond good and evil. Okay. There are a couple different options on how to spell Nietzsche's last name. I'm guessing somebody typed it in wrong, though. It seems on the covers they all say it N-I-E-T. Lab ethics textbook. Oh, this one's even better. I want the slightly fatter nib for this title. is going to, tonight's stream is going to screw up my Amazon recommendations for like a month. Now, what was the subtitle on this one? The subtitle on this one was interesting, but very long-winded. I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. The actual text is like principles, techniques, and correlations. So I'm going to instead go next one we're going to call Ethics is, well, it is an actual book, Ethics for Behavioral Analysts. It's probably going to be one that Zamo was gifted and has never used, because that's how that kind of goes. So not everything that we're going to have on Zamo's reading list is actually going to be a real book, though. Sure, I actually have. It's sort of in line. Some might point out that Margaret Mead maybe actually believed her BS, and others might point out that her test subjects found her a weird and ridiculous old white woman and decided to play games with her and her obnoxious, weird, probing questions. So, but, you know, nonetheless, Zamo does claim to be an anthropologist, so, you know. One more book on this pile of like textbooks and whatnot. And I'm gonna go back to our friend Mr. Amazon and see what I can find. I'm going to pause right here, and unfortunately I don't have OBS set up to do like a browser capture, but this is just funny. I searched for anthropology textbook. So we have some that you'd expect: social and cultural anthropology, cultural anthropology, the archaeology and anthropology of hunter-gatherers through the lens of anthropology, anthropology for dummies, the anthropology of childhood, a whole lot of the anthropology of religion, magic, and witchcraft type books, forensic anthropology, mapping medical anthropology for the 21st century, introduction to physical anthropology, and it has a picture of a chimp on the cover. So that one, I think I'm going to actually open that in a different tab so I can use as a reference for the top book on here, because it's a kind of a recurring joke in Zamo the Destroyer that Zamo likes to point out that humans are 98% chimpanzee, whereas Zamo claims to be 98% T-Rex. Anyways, one of these that just made me chuckle is like, blood magic, the anthropology of menstruation. And I just look at that and go, yep, nothing's changed. Once upon a time, I was an anthropology major in the 1990s. Based on some of these, I'm looking, going like, this is actually actively getting worse over the years. Where's the one I wanted to? Medical anthropology and ecological perspective. Outline of a theory of practice. I don't know. The Buddhist saints of the forest and the cult of amulets, what that has to do with anthropology textbooks, I have no idea. If a form, anyways. Anyways, I could go through there. Oh, the anthropology of cannibalism. I feel like that is definitely something that Zamo would want to read and take as, you know, clearly the final word on what humans do. Actually, and that will actually lead into a book that I'm going to put on the second pile, which is not an anthropology textbook, but it is a travel guide memoir kind of a book that I read a few years ago that was really excellent. It's called The Sex Lives of Cannibals. But first things first. I'm going to put a, this is not part of the actual text, but I just, it popped into my head and I have to add this as if it was the part of the actual textbook. I mean, I will say that part of the idea with Zamo was to kind of poke fun at my former major, because I was once upon a time, I was an anthropology major, which is a story for another time. But nonetheless, I will say that often some of the stuff I learned in Dr. Fisk's beginner intro to anthropology class at UBC in 1997. Later, you know, actually was stuff that I used quite a lot in my real life. Anyways, so there's one pile of books from Zamo's research library, but now we're going to go on to this next pile of books from a slightly different angle. Where was the... Oh, yeah, it was the physical anthropology, and it had a chimpanzee on the cover. I'm not going to actually exactly copy, because, you know, that would be copyright violation, but we're going to take that idea and we are going to build from there. Call it the idea would be that these two sections are going to be two separate drawings, but they may be like one at the top of the page and the other at the bottom of the page, or, you know, something like that, where the jokes kind of interact between, say, the anthropology of cannibalism and Zamo also having the book The Sex Lives of Cannibals through. I always have to stop and go, how do you spell this again? By the way, I get why they are showing a chimp on the cover of Physical Anthropology, because physical anthropology, you're usually either studying the evolution, you know, and the relationships between humans and other apes, or you're going into forensic anthropology and you're studying like how to tell how long ago a murder victim was dumped in a ravine or whatever, right? So I get why they would have a chimp on the cover of a physical anthropology book, and then it's like there was like a sideways skull, which would probably be from, you know, an ancestor or whatever. But it's just really, really funny. Because technically speaking, if you're studying chimps, that's zoology or primatology. It's not really anthropology, right? And let's say this book is also published by Banana Books. Why not? This one is clearly one that Zamo has read a lot and rifled through, and let's even stick some bookmarks in it. So we're spoofing anthropology textbooks for sure. I think the sex lives of cannibals is going to be that one. We don't want it to all be anthropology texts. After all, Zelmo can't be reading everything work-related, so we'll assume it's kind of same for fun and profit. Now I got to turn this a little bit so I can After all, Zommel does like to fleece humans out of their money. Now I'm going to go and let's have another look at Mr. Amazon. Looked at the YouTube feed and definitely think you guys are a couple minutes behind, but that's okay. So it's This isn't quite a real book title, but there is one called The Illustrated Guide to Home Chemistry Experiments. So it's kind of in the ballpark of a real one. We'll assume it's got that same publisher as the clinical chemistry one. By the way, this title is a real book, and I highly recommend it. The Sex Lives of Cannibals. It's hilarious. What happens is the author's wife had a degree of in international studies or something like that, and she got the opportunity to work. I'm not sure. I can't remember offhand if it was for the U.S. government and like U.S. aid, or if it was actually directly for the UN. But oh, did I say the? Okay, shit. I'm okay. It's actually just The Sex Lives of Cannibals, but I already wrote the, so we'll leave it at that. I may Photoshop it to fix that. Yeah, I'm going to. But anyways, she saw a job posting for this place, Kiribati, which is spelled Kiribati, Kirabati, which is in the South Pacific. And his last name is Troost, I think. But anyways, he goes along kind of thinking, oh, it'll be a year of like writing my book and blah, 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 taking a break off of work. It'd be all this fun. It's a very funny book, but you hear about how tough it is on this little atoll in the middle of the ocean and adjusting to things, and like even just weird culture. Like when they went there, I think it was like 5, maybe even 10 years after Macarena was huge, but the local people there love that. Love that song. So wherever he went, he couldn't escape from the Macarena. And like, anyways, they uprooted their lives, even like shipped some of their CDs there. And it was like talking about even stuff like finding food, because there would be like food shipped in that was expired peanut butter from Australia that they couldn't sell there anymore, but it would end up in stores in Kiribati. And there would be like ants crawling in the jar of peanut butter and stuff. And then, but because there was like so little food there, like they would just they got used to just like scooping the ants out and eating the peanut butter anyways. And and trying to get fresh water was always a nightmare and all this. But it is a very funny book, as well as really informative and whatnot. So highly recommend The Sex Lives of Cannibals by, I think it's J. Martin Troost or something like that. But if you look up Sex Lives of Cannibals, you'll find it. And I mean, he's also written other books. There's another one of his that I've got. I haven't started. I think it's called Getting Stoned with Savages or something. Anyways, it's a great little book series, so highly recommend it. Now, this one's going to be a skinny book. What will we have Zamo reading? So he's just got 2 more books to draw. And I'm going to go back to my Amazon search and getting myself probably put onto watch lists for stuff. Wacky chemistry lab. Yeah, but that's for kids. Look for stuff on. If Zamo wants to get gold, how would Zamo achieve that? Gold, and now it's going to show me a whole bunch of other crap. Yeah. Gold mining for fun, a beginner's guide to finding gold. Yeah, why not? And the price is really low, so I'm assuming it's a skinny book. Or it's somebody who just doesn't know how to price their stuff, because that happens sometimes. But I'm assuming if it's a $12 book, that's probably very, very skinny. So let me copy that. Gold mining for fun. I'm going to have to remember next time I stream with OBS. I think I hit start streaming, and then it took me a minute to realize that YouTube hadn't started yet. So I think I've got to be a lot quicker in hitting streaming on YouTube first and then OBS or something like that, where it would or have them. There's a way to make it where you hit it, only have to click it once, because otherwise, you know, somebody could be putting something in the chat and I don't, you know, they're a couple minutes behind or something like that. Or I might see it right away and talk, but if they don't hear, if my response doesn't go out to them for, you know, if there's like a 2-minute delay, that seems like I'm ignoring them, and I'm not. Anyways, this is by Deborah Venable. So we've got that. And I will just check the chat again. It's also good for me to remember, because sometimes even when I'm streaming on my phone, which doesn't have as much of a delay, I don't think, or it has like about a 20-second delay, I always have to pay attention to the chat. And part of me is always kind of wondering, like, okay, am I missing something? Or, you know, well, anyways, being mindful of the fact that there is a delay. So we've got one more slot we are going to fill. Let me see what Zamo might be wanting to read for the last book. Assuming, actually, the only one that Zamo's really probably reading are these ones, actually. The others are there as reference, but not necessarily being read. What else would Zamo be interested in? Well, I guess squirrel behavior. Trying to search for squirrel behavior, and there's like one book that says North American tree squirrels. And then it's like a bunch of children's books. It's like, okay, so if I'm actually trying to research about squirrels, you know, personally, what I want to know is, how do I stop the damn squirrels from planting hazelnuts in my effing garden? Because I'm having to rip them out, and if I don't find them in time, and they, you know, they get really thick in the trunk pretty quick, and at that point you can't rip them out, but every time you cut them, you're really just pruning them, unless you pour chemicals on them, and it's very annoying. But anyways, I'm not going to find anything about squirrel psychology here. Yeah, let's assume Zamo's doing hypnotism. Here's one. Handbook of Hypnotic Suggestions and Metaphors. That would be something Zamo would be interested in. We're actually not going to see all of the title because of the layout here. So I need to go, if it says Handbook of... kind of writing in the air because I'm trying to guess exactly where this would cut off. So if we start there with H-A-N... All right. Now I am going to take the thicker nib and put just a little bit of shadow. We are keeping it pretty low-key, but we will be starting to, you know, just put a little bit of shadow. It makes them look a little more real. And as I do that, since we are getting towards the end of tonight's stream, I will say once again, next week on Wednesday, the Zamo stream, we will be beginning a new project. And I've got to start assembling the Zamo omnibus with the comics. Now, this, it was supposed to be in the omnibus, like, of all the original Zamo comics, but Zamo's Secret Basement Lab kind of, it was mentioned in the comic run, but it wasn't really as much of a part of the story as when I started doing the Zamo podcast. So we may kind of leave this and have it as bonus material when I get around to the first book of the Zamo podcast stories. I'm just going to switch us to the full view. And that's kind of glaring a little bit, I guess. That's better, maybe. Anyways, so that's coming up. So we will be switching up streaming for the next week. As far as I know, I'm not missing any streams. So tomorrow we will be working on Noah's Archipelago with some more drawings for the coloring book. Friday we are streaming inking Ricky B, the Rock and Roll Rat, and Ricky's boss, Big Mike, is back from vacation. Although I think we have one of the B story fake ads before we get to that. And Monday, we've got the very last, well, the last of the current phase of illustrations for Miles Morrow's Pursuit of Happiness. We are doing the Z or Z, depending on how you want to say it. But the last letter of the alphabet's couple illustrations. And then we are setting that aside because I got to write some short stories to go with those drawings, and then we'll come back and do more illustrations at a future date. But we will be working on illustrating a particular short story involving Miles and Ricky. And then next Tuesday, we are wrapping up the current phase of the Noah's Archipelago Book of Days with an illustration for December. And then the week after, for both Miles and the Tuesday Noah stream, we will be working on new projects. And those will actually be, from now on, the Mondays and Tuesday streams will also be done this way in OBS, so horizontal streams. So that's fun. And yeah, what else do I want to say? Anyone who's just tuning in kind of late or missed the beginning of tonight's stream, what I'm going to do when I finish is I always kind of save it as private so that YouTube has a chance to go and do their thing with, video quality and blah, blah, blah. And when that processing finishes, then tomorrow afternoon is when I will make it available again as a public stream. So look out for that. And yeah, what else did I want to... I don't know, I think that's kind of about it. We don't have the most realistic look on these books, but that's okay. The idea is more the visual gag about titles that Zamo is reading, so... yeah, I guess the shadow would kind of go like that. All right, so let's have a look-see at what we have drawn tonight. And again, this is all stuff from Zamo's Secret Basement Lab. So the first thing we did was this drawing here of Zamo's desk. Zamo claims to be a professor of anthropology at the Iguanid University of the Jungle, working on postdoctoral research. So we've got Zamo's presumably thesis, postdoc thesis, being typed up on an old typewriter, and Zamo uses a stick with kind of like a little ball on the end to type, just holding and doing this. Very inefficient way of doing it. Zamo does have access to technology, of course, but I don't know, Zamo likes old technology. And Zamo likes things that Zamo might have found for free on the side of the road or whatnot, or at, garage sales or things like that. We've got Zamo reading something by Freud. And then we've got Zamo, she is a lizard, and she kind of likes to fancy herself as a miniature dragon, so got a little inspiration from a poster of, let me bring that right up so that it shows. But there's a poster of a dragon with a hoard of gold coins and whatnot, and Zamo has written goals underneath that. And it's trying to melt down lead and stuff like that to turn it into gold, having read about alchemy. So we've got some storage for other stuff. So this is part of the frankly dangerous and ill-advised chemistry hobby that Zamo has. So we've got those views of the lab, and then a couple of views from Zamo's research library. First up, this top one. That's kind of out of whack. There we go. I'm trying to move that to not have as much glare. I don't know, that makes it better or worse. But the titles in this first stack: Nuclear Fission 101, Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche, Clinical Chemistry, Ethics for Behavioral Analytics. I'm guessing any ethical textbooks Zamo just has to have on hand, but has never actually read it. How to Lie Like Margaret Mead, Primate Zoology by Banana Books, and The Anthropology of Cannibalism, a family cookbook. And then the other view of Zamo's, some more of Zamo's books, Physical Anthropology 101. The cover kind of loosely based on one that's actually available, and I think the one on Amazon would be Introduction to Physical Anthropology, and there is one where it shows a chimpanzee. So inspired by that, King Kong to King Tut, Scams 101. It would say for fun and profit, but you know, this book is kind of teetering over the brink of the pile, so it covers up that bit. Guide to Home Chemistry, Experiments for the Amateur, The Sex Lives of Cannibals. Again, that is a real book, and it's really funny, and I really recommend that you read it. And it's available on Amazon. And then Gold Mining for Fun, A Beginner's Guide for Finding Gold, that by Deborah Venable. That's a real book. I've never read it. I don't know if it's good or not, but I can definitely see Zamo being obsessed with gold, having picked that one up or ordered it. And then it's Handbook of Hypnotic Suggestions is the one on the bottom, which you can't really tell what it is other than it does say hypnotic on the side. And, you know, that's for when Zamo's brainwashing squirrels and all that sort of stuff. So I think we are going to call it for tonight. And that means that this is as good a time as any to pull that up. I need to make some of these with Zamo on them, but basically when I made my my overlay stuff for OBS, I was just like ripping off stuff from Noah's Archipelago comics that I had in Procreate, because then I could take the layers and muck with them. But I do need to make some for Zamo. But anyways, we've got Ricky on the one side and Miles on the other. You know, if you enjoy what I do here, do subscribe. It would be great, helps the channel, etc. And plus then you get to see more of what you apparently enjoy. So anyways, with that little message, we are going to go to another one that I need to add Zamo to. Thanks for watching, with Noah and Ursula and Ricky and Miles. And like I said, I'm streaming Monday to Friday, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Different on a rotation of 5 of my projects at any given time. And yeah, we will see you again real soon. What I'm going to throw on the outro is just the Zamo the Destroyer playlist, so you can see other Zamo stuff so far. So we're going to go to that right now, and yeah, we'll see you again real soon. Take care. Bye for now.